Welcome to the London Free Press Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Gilbert. As London City Council gets ready to wind down its budget season by finalizing the budget tomorrow, some Londoners have made it very clear that they're unhappy with just how much money the London Police Service is receiving. So today I'm talking with London Free Press City Hall reporter Jack Moulton about the protest at the public input session earlier this week. Hi, Jack. How are you?
Good, Rachel. Thanks for having me again.
Yes, well, we love having you on for sure. And I know you've had a busy week. It's going to be a busy week for you with all the budget finalizations. So let's just talk about kind of overall. I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but for those who may have missed it, the London Police Service is getting a huge chunk of the City Hall budget. Can you just summarize how much they're getting and some of the things that the police have said they need the money for?
Yeah, so avid watchers or readers of ours have probably seen the police budget repeated a lot. The total ask over 4 years is $672 million, um, uh, to which I believe this year is the budget will be about $168 million, which is somewhere in the neighborhood of a 28% bump over 2023.
Mm.
And that's led to the how it stands now, the 8.7% property tax hike this year alone. More than half of that is just for the police increase. So that's attracted a lot of attention, good and bad. There's been a lot of discussion about I think one of the most forefront issues is police response times, and this is something that community members and police alike have focused on, how for lower priority calls, it can sometimes take hours or days for police to respond. So there is some awareness and some agreement around the police getting an enhancement of some kind, but the scope to which they're getting one has irked some people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. What are some of the things that the police have said the money is needed for? Because there is a myriad of things that they had talked about during the budget sessions.
Yeah, so Chief Tai Trong has emphasized that this is a sweeping budget to sort of modernize the police force. So they want to bring on board about just under 200 people, both about half and half officers and civilians. They want to bring in new equipment, tasers, drones, a command incident vehicle, a another armored vehicle, which has proved to be one of the flashpoints. And another one is a new training center with the London Fire Department, which, between operating and capital costs, I believe is somewhere in the neighborhood of $200 million of the $600 million ask.
Wow.
So lots to think about in this budget, and it's been extensively picked apart.
Yeah. Okay. So there was the final public input session for this budget session, this budget season. It really is a season for you because you're there all the time. Was on Tuesday of this week. Is that right? Tuesday?
That's right.
Okay. And so this one was a big one. There was a lot of people there and a protest, actually, lots of people protesting the police budget. How many people were there? Like how many rooms did they fill? Where did they all go? Did they all fit in council chambers?
So the short answer is no. I'll preface this by starting before the meeting. And
Okay.
so with the agenda for the meeting that was posted ahead of time, there were, including the added agenda, which was sort of late submissions, there were a total of 74 pieces of correspondence received from members of the public.
Okay.
Not every one of them addressed the police budget, but it's more than half of those letters, possibly even two-thirds, were addressing the police in some capacity. They started off mostly critical of the budget and just how much it was eating into this year's property tax hike, and, concerns around individual items like the light armored vehicle and the training center.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, a couple different, letters emerged showing support for the police budget, again, looking to response times and again, touching on that sort of modernization of the police force. Then it moved to Tuesday. While the meeting was at 4, there was a rally at 2:30 ahead of the meeting where around somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 or more people came out to the steps of City Hall expressing their displeasure at this budget, which they see as inflated, and some of these tens or hundreds of millions of dollars could be better spent, they argue, on housing initiatives and the library, transit, other stuff in the community. And so when the meeting started, a lot of these people stuck around. There's council chambers, which seats a couple dozen people. But then there were also 3 committee rooms of overfill.
Wow. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Most people don't show up for that regular council meetings, right? That is not a normal amount.
It's not a normal sighting for sure.
No.
And was even more than that showed up than during the first public meeting. The first public meeting that was before the Mayor Josh Morgan released his budget, and as a result, there was a whole grab bag of issues that people were concerned about because it wasn't clear what was being invested in yet. But that was not really the case this time around. There were still people, asking for investments into specific things, housing, transit. But out of a total of 75 speakers, I'll give you a rough percentage. I would say more than 3/4 of them address the police in some capacity. And in a scale of roughly 4-1, they were all opposed to the police budget as is. And there was some degree of nuance. You had some people who specifically were agreeing with, some of the manpower related asks of the police. Again, coming back to those response times. But some folks who were, pointing to past, bad behavior of officers, and saying how like a huge budget hike like this could be seen as sort of rewarding a bad culture. Some were invoking the recent charges announced in relation to the World Junior players in 2018. Some were referencing officers who have been charged for a litany of things.
Okay.
The whole spectrum. There was a wide spectrum of opinions, but the vast majority of them were against the increase.
The increase. Okay. And a lot of them, were they all against a total increase? Or, I mean, and you said it was nuanced. I would assume that most people agree they need some kind of increase, but maybe not this much. Is that kind of what you were hearing?
Yeah, I would say so. There was a lot of discussion and sort of fit into that nuance, expressing concern, particularly around the militarization of the police, and especially in relation to that light armored vehicle, some of the heavier equipment, as with regards to drones and command vehicles and the likes. So there was a lot of concern with regard to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some argued that the police budget is based on fear. And this is something that we heard from some counselors during debate time. What were the arguments that this budget is based on fear, the police budget specifically?
Well, I think that goes back to a lot of the publicity from the police itself. In a lot of those early press conferences where they were revealing the budget and sort of justifying it, they were repeating statistics that London is a dangerous city, and that certain types of crime are on the rise. That didn't hold water with a couple counselors and with some members of the public who pointed to the fact that you know, using the what's called the crime severity index from StatsCan, they characterized it as cherry picking a little because and they viewed it as not reflective of the whole situation on the ground. There was one former civilian police employee, including who worked in London, who spoke last night and said something to the effect of, the police are downplaying the role they've played in keeping London's crime rate low, and specifically referenced how even though the force hasn't added that many people or that many officers, I should say, to the force in the last number of years, there hasn't been a real drastic increase in the crime rate. And in fact, um, I believe we've reported before that the crime rate in London has hit a multi-decade low.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Um, some were in favor of the increase though for the police budget, and we've talked a lot about those that were against it, or maybe don't want such a huge hike. But those that were in favor of the increase for police, what were some of their arguments, and did they speak at all on Tuesday?
Yeah, there were a handful of people who spoke in favor of the police budget as is. Um, there was one particular business owner who was talking about, graffiti and vandalism, and how that affects, insurance claims and the like.
That's true.
And it all sort of stems back to those response times. And there was a reference to, if insurance rates gets too high and the police aren't prompt enough in their response, maybe some business owners will call it quits. There was also another letter. In one of those letters submitted before the meeting, there were a pair of residents who lived in Ward 4, Old East Village, who were talking about, vandalism as well, break-ins and people trespassing. So there were some people in support of the police budget, but a lot of it stemmed back to mostly manpower related to concerns.
Mm-hmm. There were two police board members who addressed the politicians. Why were they speaking, and how was their appearance received by those in the gallery?
Yes, so two former city councilors, Megan Walker and Nancy Branscombe, who appeared at the public meeting last night. And as you might expect, they're members of the Police Services Board. They came out in favor of the budget as is, calling for a safer city now. That's been sort of the tagline throughout the promotion process.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to an incident last night where, while Ms. Walker was appearing, just as you and I are in a Zoom call right now, the meetings at council are conducted in a Zoom call as well.
Okay.
So they have one camera on Chambers and whoever's speaking, whether it's at the council table or up in the gallery. And they had cameras on the different committee rooms where people were speaking. Ms. Walker appeared virtually, that is to say, she wasn't at City Hall,
Right.
and was added to the call. So while she was speaking with her camera on, someone from one of the committee rooms, you could see quickly was sort of scribbling out something on a piece of paper, walked up to the camera in the committee room, held it up, said something to the effect of police services board members don't get to speak. And,
Okay.
judging by some of the social media discourse after the fact, I think some people viewed their appearance as, possibly inappropriate.
Okay.
Um, and
Maybe as in they've already had their say by suggesting this budget and presenting it.
Yeah, some people felt that, they'd had an adequate chance to defend and speak to the budget, and that time should be allotted for, average ordinary residents.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so when this member of the public held that sign up to the camera was turned off for a few minutes, and once Miss Walker finished speaking, there was a point of order from Councillor Corrine Rahman saying that all members of the public are entitled to speak, and that includes delegates to some capacity. That's not abnormal. At the first public meeting, there were several delegates of the London Arts Council, Grand Theatre.
Mhm.
During budget talks, some delegates are invited to answer questions from councillors. So it's not abnormal, but some members of the public were a bit concerned about it.
Okay. Will this protest even help, or is this too little too late? I mean, the budget is being finalized tomorrow, and this was the very last public input meeting. There were others before this. Is this even going to help, or can any changes be made before it's finalized tomorrow?
That's the question. Because now we're closing in on this 30-day deadline as set out in the legislation governing the budget process under the strong mayor powers.
Okay.
So, council's convening a special meeting tomorrow, Thursday, the 29th, to basically acknowledge, the contents of the budget talks, the budget committee meetings.
Mhm.
But overall, whatever's in place after Thursday is the budget, full stop. So that led to some concerns from the public and council. Some members of the public did acknowledge the sort of late timing of this public meeting and how it got so close to the final product. It was even referred to a couple times as a sham because they believed that whatever was in place at that moment in time, counselors wouldn't be easily convinced to go against it.
I can see that point because why even have a public meeting scheduled for the day before it's going to be finalized? I mean, you should have maybe scheduled that a week ahead, right?
Yeah, and some counselors pointed that out. I believe I mentioned it in our last discussion
Mhm.
at the last budget meeting, to which Budget Chair Elizabeth Pelosa was explaining that council could bring forward emergent motions,
Okay. Yep.
which include amendments to the budget as long as it's before the deadline. But they require a vote of council even just to hear it. And so, there's questions about if some of these amendments could even be brought forward. And one of them, I've reported on earlier this week, was a motion from Councillor Anna Hopkins, who wants to trim 5% from the police budget in their 5 different business cases, as it were. So
Okay.
their manpower asks, their vehicle asks, everything. 5% from each of those, and I believe it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 million over 4 years from that 672 million.
Okay. So tomorrow's the meeting for the finalization. Do we know if any emergent motions have come forward? Have you received the agenda at this at the time we're recording this? Have you seen anything yet that might be coming forward tomorrow to extend this process?
So based on what's been released and in discussion with some council members, as to my knowledge right now, there are 2 motions scheduled to be heard
Okay.
on this last day. One, as I mentioned, is from Councillor Hopkins about the police budget. Councillor Sam Trossow is also bringing forward a motion to approve a little bit of funding for an arts initiative. But I believe as we're speaking right now, the added agenda will be released shortly by the city. So,
Okay.
but that's what's on the table right now.
Okay. Well, we will see what happens tomorrow at the meeting, and I'm sure you'll be there, and we'll get your reporting and all the follow up from you at lfpress.com. Thank you so much, Jack, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.